The insurance check arrived 3 weeks after the funeral, folded neatly inside a thin white envelope that felt lighter than it should have. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at the number as if it might change if I blinked hard enough. It barely covered the burial. After 41 years of marriage, that was all my husband's life was reduced to on paper, a figure that couldn't even pay for the flowers people sent out of guilt or habit. When the last casserole dish was returned and the sympathy card stopped coming, I was left alone in a quiet house that suddenly felt too big and too honest. I was 64 years old, and for the first time since I was 22, I had no idea how I was going to survive. I'd spent most of my life teaching literature, essays, how to find meaning in words. I never imagined those same words would one day mock me as I tried to stretch a modest pension across rent, utilities, medication, and groceries. Grief is expensive. Loneliness even more so. That's how I found myself taking a part-time night job at Hawthorne Regional, a privately run medical facility on the edge of a fictional city most people pass through without noticing. 3 nights a week. Evening hours. Billing support. A windowless office buried beneath layers of concrete and humming fluorescent lights. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me occupied. Kept me from counting the seconds between heartbeats in an empty house. My shift ended at 11:45 p.m. For months I took the city bus home, the last one rolling through just after midnight. I knew the driver by name. He waited when he saw me running. We shared polite nods, nothing more. Then without warning the schedule changed. Operational adjustments, they called it. The final bus now left at 11:10. I asked my supervisor if I could leave early. She looked at me with practiced sympathy and shook her head. Budget's tight, Vivian. I wish I could. I couldn't afford to lose those hours. So I did what my daughter had been telling me to do for years. I downloaded a rideshare app. I hated the idea at first. Strangers. Late nights. Sitting in the back seat of someone else's car while my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. The first night I used it, my hand hovered over the screen longer than necessary. That's when Ethan Hale accepted the request. His profile photo showed a man in his late 50s, tired eyes, neutral expression. 5-star rating. Thousands of completed rides. Silver sedan. When his car pulled up to the staff exit, I almost canceled. The parking lot lights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. But it was cold and I was exhausted, and the thought of walking home was worse. So I opened the door and climbed into the back seat. Evening, he said, voice calm, unforced. Long shift. Always, I replied, giving him my address. He didn't pry. Didn't fill the silence with chatter. Just drove. The ride lasted 12 minutes. 12 quiet, uneventful minutes that felt safe. By the 3rd week, something curious happened. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, Ethan's car was the one that arrived. Same time. Same calm greeting. Same unspoken understanding that I didn't always want to talk. Eventually, conversation crept in carefully, like a cat testing unfamiliar ground. He told me he used to work logistics before the company downsized. That driving paid the bills now. That he worked nights because they were quieter. I told him I used to teach. That I missed the noise of classrooms. That silence had a way of getting loud after midnight. There was a familiarity in him I couldn't explain. The look of someone who had been knocked down by life and stood back up not because they were brave, but because there was no alternative. One night, after a particularly long shift, I noticed his hands tremble slightly as he adjusted the mirrors. "You okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "My daughter had a baby last year. Haven't met her yet." I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt honest. "I'm sorry." He glanced at me in the mirror, surprised. Most people don't say that. After that, I started tipping a little extra. Not enough to hurt my budget, just enough to say I see you. He tried to refuse the first time. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to." By November, those rides became the anchor points of my week. The moments I looked forward to without admitting it out loud. Ethan never rushed me. Never made me feel like a burden. Sometimes we talked about nothing. Sometimes about everything. One night, on impulse, I brought him a cup of coffee from the staff lounge. He stared at it like I'd handed him something sacred. "This is unnecessary," he said quietly. "So is kindness," I replied. "But it helps." From then on, coffee became our ritual. December arrived sharp and early that year. Frost glazed the sidewalks. The facility hung paper snowflakes that did nothing to warm the concrete walls. I switched the coffee for hot chocolate and taped a small ribbon to the lid. My ex used to do things like this, Ethan said softly. Little things. You notice them now, I said. That counts. It was the second Thursday of the month when I sensed the shift. The moment I got into the car, something was wrong. Ethan didn't start driving right away. His jaw was tight. His eyes kept flicking to the mirror. Not the casual glance I was used to, but something sharper. Focused. Vivian, he said finally, pulling away from the curb. I need to ask you something. My stomach tightened. Okay. There's a man who lives near you, he continued slowly. A few houses down. Dark pickup truck. Do you know him? The question came out of nowhere, and before I could answer, he turned left, away from my street. Ethan, I said, my voice thin. Where are we going? Somewhere quiet, he replied. And you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Fear crawled up my spine, cold and deliberate. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. Those 12-minute rides hadn't just been saving me from loneliness. They had been protecting me from something I didn't even know was coming. Ethan didn't answer right away. He drove past my street, past the familiar row of houses I could have drawn from memory, and into a stretch of road that bordered a closed shopping strip. The storefronts were dark, their windows reflecting nothing but our headlights and my own pale face staring back at me. Ethan, I said again, sharper this time. You're scaring me. I know, he replied quietly. And I'm sorry, but I couldn't say this while driving you home. Not safely. He pulled into the empty parking lot of an abandoned hardware store and put the car in park. The engine kept running. The ticking sound felt loud in the silence. He turned in his seat just enough to face me, not fully, like he didn't want to corner me. Before I say anything else, he said, I need to know something. You live alone, right? A knot formed in my chest. Yes. No pets. No one coming by late at night. No, I whispered. Just me. He exhaled slowly, as if that answer both confirmed and worsened something. His fingers tightened around his phone. Vivian, he said, I need you to understand that I wouldn't do this if I wasn't sure. I don't get involved in passengers' lives. I don't cross lines. But what I heard, what I've been hearing, I couldn't ignore it anymore. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Hearing what? There's a man I've picked up several times in the last month, he said. Always late. Always drunk. Always angry. I tried to picture faces, neighbors, passing strangers, but nothing came clearly. He talks, Ethan continued. A lot. And drunk people forget that drivers are there. I swallowed. Ethan, please. He unlocked his phone and turned it slightly so I could see the screen. A notes app. Dates. Times. Short phrases written in careful, unemotional lines. I started writing things down after the third ride, he said. Not because of you. Because of what he kept repeating. What did he repeat? I asked, though some part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. Your schedule. The words landed heavy like stones. He mentioned a woman who works late at a medical facility, Ethan said. Same nights every week. Same departure time. Same street. That could be anyone, I said quickly, clinging to denial. That's what I told myself, he replied. Until he said your name. The parking lot seemed to tilt. No, I breathed. That's not possible. Ethan scrolled and read aloud, his voice steady even as his hand shook. She notices things. Asks questions. Thinks she's smarter than she is. My mouth went dry. House is empty after 11. Easy. I pressed my hands against my knees, trying to ground myself. Who is he? I asked. A neighbor, Ethan said. Lives a few houses down from you. I won't say his name yet. I want you to stay focused. Focused. As if my world hadn't just cracked open. I thought it was just drunk nonsense at first, he went on. People say ugly things when they drink. But then I picked him up again. And again. Same talk. Same address. He looked at me then, really looked at me. Last Saturday, he said. He said something that made my blood run cold. I held my breath. If she figures it out, I'll handle it. One way or another. The word handle echoed in my head, sharp and final. I shook my head slowly. I don't understand. I don't even know this man. That's what scares me, Ethan said. You don't have to know him for him to notice you. He leaned back and stared through the windshield. 2 nights ago, he continued, I drove past your street after my last ride. Not because of him. Because of you. I needed to reassure myself that I was overreacting. My pulse spiked. And I saw his truck, Ethan said. Parked with the lights off. Engine running. 2 houses away from yours. My chest tightened painfully. That doesn't mean anything. I told myself that too, he said. Until tonight. I felt dizzy. What happened tonight? He turned to me fully now, eyes dark and serious. Before I picked you up, he said, I drove past your place again. The air seemed to vanish from the car. He was there, Ethan said. Right in front of your house. My voice barely worked. Doing what? Standing on your porch. A cold wave rushed through me, starting at my scalp and pouring down my spine. He tried your door, Ethan said. He jiggled the handle. Looked through the front window. My stomach lurched. It was locked, he said quickly. He couldn't get in. But he didn't leave. He went back to his truck and sat there, watching. I stared at him, unable to speak. That's when I knew, Ethan said. I couldn't just drive you home and pretend none of this existed. Tears blurred my vision. Why me? I whispered. What did I do? I don't think this is personal, he said gently. I think it's convenient. The word terrified me more than anything else. He handed me his phone. Everything I've written down. Times, phrases, patterns. You can read it yourself. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Seeing it all laid out, the repetition, the fixation made it impossible to dismiss. What do? I asked. You don't go home tonight, Ethan said immediately. You don't follow your routine. And tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll go to the police, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. No, he said firmly. We go now. I looked at him shocked. It's nearly midnight. He tried your door tonight, Ethan said. While you were at work. That changes everything. Fear battled logic inside me. What if I'm overreacting? I asked weakly. Ethan's expression softened, but his voice didn't waver. Vivian, if I'm wrong, the police send you home and you lose an hour of sleep. If I'm right. He didn't finish the sentence. The silence did it for him. I closed my eyes, my husband's face flashing in my mind, the life I'd barely managed to rebuild after losing him. Okay, I said finally. Where do we go? Ethan started the car. The station on Harbor Avenue. I'll stay with you. As we pulled out of the parking lot, a terrible realization settled over me. If Ethan hadn't been paying attention, if he hadn't listened, if he hadn't cared enough to notice patterns instead of dismissing them, I would have gone home to an empty house tonight, and someone else would have been waiting there. The police station sat at the edge of Harbor Avenue, a squat concrete building washed in pale yellow light. At that hour, the parking lot was nearly empty, which somehow made the place feel more ominous than comforting. Ethan parked near the entrance and shut off the engine. We'll go in together, he said. You won't be alone. I nodded, though my legs felt unsteady as I stepped out of the car. The cold night air bit through my coat, sharp and grounding. I welcomed the sting. It reminded me I was still here, still breathing. Inside, the station smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. A young officer sat behind the front desk. His posture relaxed until he took in our faces. Can I help you? He asked. Yes, Ethan said. We need to report a stalking incident. Possibly an attempted break-in. That did it. The officer straightened immediately and motioned us toward a small interview room. The door closed with a soft but final click behind us. A detective joined us minutes later, gray at the temples, eyes that missed nothing. He introduced himself as Detective Larkin and asked me to start from the beginning. So I did. I told them about my schedule, the night shifts, the rides home, the man I barely knew who lived near me, how safe my life had felt until that very evening. Ethan slid his phone across the table. These are my notes, he said. And I have audio recordings from the rides. The detective raised an eyebrow. Recordings. Passengers consent through the app, Ethan replied. It's for driver safety. Larkin nodded and opened a laptop. When the first recording played, I felt my stomach drop. The voice that filled the room was slurred, aggressive, careless. She thinks she's clever. Always watching. Always poking around where she shouldn't. I squeezed my hands together to stop them from shaking. I know when she leaves. I know when the place is empty. The detective stopped the recording and looked at me carefully. Mrs. Steele, do you recognize this voice? No, I whispered. But I recognized the words. Another officer entered quietly and stood near the door as the recordings continued. Each one painted the same picture: obsession, surveillance, and something darker underneath. When the last file ended, the room was silent. You mentioned you work at Hawthorne Regional, Detective Larkin said slowly. What do you do there? Billing, I replied. Data review. Audits. His eyes sharpened. What kind of audits? Insurance claims, I said. Mostly routine. Catching errors. Missing documentation. The detective exchanged a look with the younger officer. Have there been discrepancies lately? He asked. Yes, I said, my pulse quickening. But nothing major. Just missing files. How many? Enough to trigger a manual review, I said. Mostly older patient records. The detective leaned back. Mrs. Steele, the man you're describing works at Hawthorne Regional. The words hit me like ice water. No, I said immediately. That can't be right. He's on the night maintenance crew, Larkin continued. Assigned to lower levels. Storage. Records. A memory surfaced. Faint but persistent. A man pushing a cleaning cart. Baseball cap pulled low. Passing me in the hallway around 11:20 most nights. I'd never looked at his face. Oh my God, I whispered. You may not know him personally, the detective said. But he knows you. Your routine. Your role. And the audit, the younger officer added. If he's involved in something illegal, and he thinks you're close to uncovering it. That's why, I said, my voice breaking. That's why he's watching me. The detective stood abruptly. We're requesting a search warrant tonight. What about my house? I asked. Can I go home? No, he said firmly. Not yet. They moved fast after that. Phone calls. Paperwork. Controlled urgency that made it clear this wasn't just about me anymore. An officer drove me to a nearby hotel under temporary protective watch. I barely slept, every sound in the hallway making my heart race. At 6:12 a.m. my phone rang. Detective Larkin. We found them, he said. My breath caught. Found what? Boxes of patient records in his garage. Over 200 files. Evidence of fraudulent billing going back nearly 3 years. Tears streamed down my face. A mix of relief and horror. He's been arrested, Larkin continued. Attempted burglary. Stalking. Financial fraud. I sank onto the edge of the bed, shaking. You're safe now, Mrs. Steele, he said. But this isn't over yet. When Ethan picked me up later that morning, I noticed something new in his eyes. Not fear but resolve. I should have noticed sooner, he said quietly as we drove. No, I replied. You noticed when it mattered. He glanced at me surprised. I didn't know it yet, but the truth behind why Ethan had been paying attention was about to surface. And it would change everything I thought I knew about him. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of locked doors, unfamiliar rooms, and voices that spoke gently but carried the weight of urgency. The police insisted I remain under temporary protection, while they expanded the investigation. My quiet life, the careful routine I had built after my husband's death, vanished overnight. They told me his name was Mark Ellison, a maintenance technician. Night shift. No criminal record worth mentioning. The kind of man people overlook without effort, which I was beginning to understand was exactly how he had managed to do what he did for so long. Detective Larkin visited me at the hotel later that afternoon. He sat across from me, folder in hand, his expression serious but not unkind. We're still going through everything, he said. But we already know this wasn't a small operation. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them steady. How bad is it? Worse than we initially thought, he replied. He wasn't just stealing files. He was altering claim histories, rerouting reimbursements through shell accounts. Patients never notice because the losses were spread out. And I almost did, I said softly. He nodded. You ask questions. That's what put you on his radar. The thought made my skin crawl. Curiosity, something I'd spent my life encouraging in students, had nearly gotten me killed. Later that evening, Ethan stopped by. Not as my driver. Not through the app. Just Ethan. I wasn't sure if I should come, he said, standing awkwardly near the door of the small hotel room. I didn't want to cross a line. You didn't, I told him. You saved my life. He sat down heavily, rubbing his hands together. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked unsure. There's something I should tell you, he said quietly. I waited. Years ago, he began. Before I started driving, my daughter was in trouble. He told me about the man she dated. Charming. Persistent. The kind who always seemed to know where she was. She said he was just being attentive, Ethan said. I told her she was lucky. His voice tightened. He wasn't attentive. He was watching her. One night, the man broke into her apartment. Hurt her badly. The kind of hurt that doesn't fade quickly or completely. I didn't see it coming, Ethan said. I didn't listen when I should have. His wife left soon after, taking their daughter with her. The guilt stayed. So now, he said, meeting my eyes, I pay attention. I notice patterns. I don't dismiss warning signs. Emotion swelled in my chest. That pain made you careful, I said. It made you protect someone else. He looked down. It doesn't erase the past. No, I said gently. But it changes the future. The trial preparation took months. I was asked to testify not just about the attempted break-in but about the audit process, the missing files, the moment things stopped making sense. Sitting in a courtroom months later, facing a man I had unknowingly passed in the hallway countless times, was surreal. Mark Ellison avoided my eyes. The prosecution laid everything out, the recordings, the stolen files, the false claims, the attempted intimidation. Ethan's meticulous notes became critical evidence. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, I felt no triumph. Only release. He was sentenced to federal prison. Afterward, life didn't snap back into place. It shifted slowly, cautiously, like furniture being rearranged after an earthquake. I returned home eventually, changed the locks, installed new lights, learned how to sleep through the night again. Ethan continued driving me to work, though I sat in the front seat now. We talked more. About ordinary things. About healing. About the strange ways lives intersect. One evening, months later, Ethan's phone rang mid-drive. He answered, then pulled over. When he turned to me, his eyes were wet. My daughter wants to meet, he said. She heard about the trial. About what I did. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's wonderful. Maybe, he said. Maybe it's a second chance. I smiled through tears. You earned it. The worst was behind us. Or so I thought. Because healing, I would soon learn, doesn't end with justice. It ends with choice. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, in moments so small I almost missed them. The first night I slept past dawn without jolting awake. The first time I walked to my front door without scanning the street. The first time the silence in my house felt peaceful instead of threatening. Justice had been swift in the end. Closure was slower. The court sentenced Mark Ellison to 12 years in federal prison. The charges stacked neatly on paper: fraud, stalking, attempted burglary, but none of them fully captured what he had taken from me. Not just safety, but the illusion that ordinary life is immune to darkness. For a long time I blamed myself. If I hadn't been so diligent at work. If I hadn't asked questions. If I hadn't noticed patterns. But therapy taught me something important. Accountability belongs to the one who chooses harm, not the one who chooses integrity. I went back to Hawthorne Regional 6 weeks after the trial. The building hadn't changed, same humming lights, same sterile hallways, but I no longer rushed through the basement with my head down. I walked upright, aware, unashamed. The audit team finished their review. Policies were rewritten. Safeguards added. My role quietly expanded. Not as a reward but as trust. At night, Ethan still drove me home. Not because I needed him to, because we chose to keep showing up for each other. We were no longer driver and passenger. We were companions in recovery, bonded by something neither of us would have chosen, yet both of us had survived. On Sundays, Ethan invited me to dinner. The first time I hesitated. The second time I brought dessert. The third time his daughter opened the door. She looked at me for a long moment before pulling me into a hug that surprised us both. "Thank you," she whispered. For what, I wasn't sure, but I held her anyway. His granddaughter climbed into my lap during dinner, sticky fingers clutching my necklace, laughing as if the world had never been cruel. They started calling me Aunt Vivian, and I didn't correct them. Family, I learned, doesn't always arrive through blood. Sometimes it forms through shared survival. One evening, nearly a year after the night everything changed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights glow. The house felt warm again. Lived in. Mine. I thought about the woman I had been when this story began, grieving, invisible, quietly afraid of becoming irrelevant. And I thought about how close I had come to never becoming anything else. All because of a man who paid attention. All because of a few small acts of kindness that said, "You matter." A few weeks later, a new hire joined our department. Young. Overwhelmed. Her hands shook as she tried to make sense of her first audit. I recognized the look immediately, so I brought her coffee, sat with her during break, told her it would get easier. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said. "You don't know how much this helps." But I did. I knew exactly how much it helped. Because kindness doesn't announce itself as heroic. It disguises itself as ordinary. And sometimes it saves a life. Mine did. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life inspired stories about courage, kindness, and the moments that change everything. And comment below. Have you ever experienced a small act of kindness that made a big difference? Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear.